Good evening, Energy Rogue Nation. Welcome back to another weather discussion. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and happy Tuesday. This video is coming out a little bit late, but I think it's pretty much on par with when the videos typically do come out. First of all, I just want to thank each and every one of you for the support on the YouTube channel called Weather Minds. These are where the videos are posted to. And so whether you're an Energy Rogue subscriber or not, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It is Weather Minds. All you got to do if you're already watching this video, and there's going to be quite a few of you that do and have, hit that subscribe button down below. That way you get notifications on when these videos do drop. That also leads to my second announcement for tonight. Right now, I've only been uploading every Tuesday and Thursday, with Tuesday being primarily focused on the United States and Thursday being primarily focused on European weather. That said, beginning this weekend, I will be adding 2 more uploads to the week. Those will be coming on Saturday and Sunday of each week. So now you have 4 days, that's right, 4 days to be informed and in the loop about some of these weather trends that we're seeing in both the United States and Europe. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. That gives you every more reason to do so. I don't get any money from it. It's just simply me putting out content for not just the Energy Rogue subscribers, but of course the general viewership as well. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. It is completely free to do, and you get notified whenever those videos do drop. All right, so let's get right into tonight's discussion. And whether or not you're an energy natural gas trader, if you're just somebody that is interested in the weather and is concerned about the weather for your area on a day-to-day basis, you guys probably know by now that the last few years of winter have not been great. Actually, I would make the argument they've been pretty lackluster, especially in the United States and in some cases Europe. We have seen over the last few years, since 2019 and technically 2020, sort of a downward trend in our overall cold air temperatures across the lower 48. And the real question coming into this season is, here we are heading into La Nina, which La Nina does tend to favor cooler temperatures for places like the northern United States. We're talking about the Northeast and the Midwest, the upper Midwest, the Pacific Northwest. Well, in this pattern, you would think that we would be expecting colder temperatures this winter. However, that hasn't really been the sentiment amongst many. And that's because even with El Nino last year in 2024, look back to 21, 22, and even 2023, we really didn't have a solid winter, right? And I should even really more focus on 2021 and 2022. Those were 2 years, even 2020, that were La Nina. And since then, we've seen a bit of a downward trend, regardless of El Nino or La Nina. So already coming into this season, there was a lot of bearish sentiment about, are we going to see winter return? And I would actually make the argument yes. And we're going to go over that here tonight. And I've actually been one of the few that's been more bullish on it. And I don't want to make myself out to be Nostradamus. I'm certainly not. I think there's really more of a 50-50 split amongst the weather community on what is really going to be of this winter. Are we going to see below normal temperatures for places like the Midwest and the Northeast? Or is it going to be more of a dud, more of the same, where we're once again seeing more of a mild winter, right? So I would put myself into the bucket of the 50% that's more bullish on the winter for those areas. Now, what I will say before we hop into some of these products is I can't say the same for the South Central United States. Now, if you've been watching my video content, I have mentioned that places like Texas and Oklahoma, the Red River Valley, will see a cold spell or a Arctic blast at some point this season. At least one. And I still am holding myself to that. But I think at the end of the day, once we get past December, January, February, we're going to look back at this winter for the southern half of the United States and say, this was an above normal winter for that area of the country. And the same could probably be said about the southwestern US. But it's really going to be a tale of two regions. And that divide really being between anywhere south of that Missouri-Kentucky line. It's going to be the great divide, if you will, of this winter season. So let's dive into it, and we're going to go over a few products tonight, even some that I typically don't do. We're actually going to look at things from two different faucets. We're going to look first at the short term, and when I say short term to medium term, we're really talking more about that 5 to 7 day period. But then the other half of the conversation tonight is going to be using some climate models, such as the CFS, to show you a longer range view. Now, for those of you that don't know the CFS, it is a climate model, and we have a couple in our portfolio. Not our portfolio, but to the general public. These are open source products. But the CFS does go out well over 800 hours. So we can actually look at some of these charts that go as far as late December. I will caution you, as many of you know, I always preach to the choir when I say this, the CFS is highly variable. Any model, for that matter, is highly variable once we go out a certain period of time. And that's especially true once we go beyond that 5 to 7 days. But the point of tonight's conversation is not necessarily to narrow down values of cold, but rather to show you the pattern. Because if we have a pattern supportive for colder weather, well, that pretty much draws a pretty broad but yet effective conclusion that we're going to see some colder temperatures. Whereas if we see a pattern that doesn't support it, well, then that's not the case. So we're going to really focus more in on the weather pattern itself, but of course we'll also touch briefly on some of the cooling and heating degree day values that we see currently on some of the charts on WX Rogue. Let's start with this first. This is the GFS model, and this is going out the next several days. This product you're looking at is not something you're going to see on WX Rogue. It's not even going to be something you see on websites that are public, Pivotal Weather, College DuPage, etc. This is an in-house product that we've developed. We are deriving it from the GFS, but we are plotting specifically cooling and heating degree days, right? So over on your right, pay closer attention to this. It's going to essentially loop through each frame pretty quickly, so I'll keep playing it here. But as we go forward in time, keep an eye on the date, right? So this is now November 28th. This is taking us past Thanksgiving. Look at the beginnings. This is today, and keep an eye on that red. Watch what happens here. Look at that big dive of heating degree days. So what that's denoting is something that we've been talking about here on the channel for a while, actually last week, which is the idea that as we head into next week, that American Thanksgiving holiday and Black Friday, we're going to be seeing call it a Greenland block that sets up in Greenland, an upper level ridge, that helps to then pour down some of that colder air. So anytime you see that red on the map, especially for a heating degree day product, that is signifying really high values of heating degree days. Now, for my energy and nat gas traders, bear in mind one thing. There's a little caveat to this. This is not population weighted. This is unweighted heating degree days. So take that in mind. It still is effective. It still provides value. Either way, even if we were to incorporate population weight, you are likely to get more of that general spread regardless. Okay, so if you're not an energy nat gas trader watching this video, cover your ears. But for those folks that are traders, you know what I'm talking about. This is unweighted values. We're not factoring in gas weight. We're not factoring in population weight. This is just strictly HGD CDD. Now, with that said, again, general trend you can see as we continue to play this through. Over these next several days, we see a pretty bullish trend in some of those, really colder temperatures, right? And we could be talking about temperatures in places like the lower Great Lakes, waking up, say, later next week, seeing temperatures anywhere between that 15 to 30 degree mark, right? So definitely below freezing temperatures. For those areas that have not had a hard freeze, we will see your first hard freeze, and there may be some spots that haven't yet. So, I'm talking about even places south of Missouri, that Missouri-Kentucky line that could see some of that hard freeze take place. And I know I'm going back on my word here, folks. I mentioned I wasn't going to be going over specific numbers, but again, we're giving you more of a ballpark to kind of sort of factor in the uncertainty, but then also give you a general spread on what we are to expect, right? So that should give you a pretty good idea as far as what we are on tap for. That said, in the immediate short term, look at Texas, right? So we could see some cold air get as far south as the Panhandle, but can't say the same for the Gulf, right? The Gulf is going to remain without those heating degree days. It's still going to even remain in some spots above normal. So especially as we head towards, again, late next week into the Thanksgiving holiday season, the exception to the rule is going to be places south of Dallas, Houston, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi. You can especially pick that out when we see the little plume of CDD. Could see CDD values still sticking anywhere between 5 to 15 CDD within that Gulf region. So, like I said, this overall winter weather outlook for the next couple of months is actually playing out in the next 7 days, right? We have the southern United States, for the most part, remaining at or above normal with their temperatures. But then on the flip side, we're seeing the Midwest, the Northeast, and New England with some of those much colder temperatures. And by the way, as I play through this too, there's something else I want to note. We're seeing a lot of oscillating in our pattern still. Let's not forget that, right? So, even before we get to that 26th to 28th period, you can see that we will still have brief periods of warm up across the lower Great Lakes and even parts of the Northeast. But it's going to essentially be followed by some of those colder temperatures. So we have still volatility that exists, but the general trend you're going to see moving forward, at least over these next few weeks, and I would actually argue for most of this season, is going to be some of those more prolific colder temperatures starting to set in more consistently for the Midwest, the Northeast, New England, Upper Midwest. So, by the way, this page for my Energy Nat Gas folks, I am actively working on this, as you can tell. We need to clean this up, right? We got a little bit of a indent issue and things are not aligned. So this is basically like a beta of what it's going to be. The other thing, is we're going to also have it where rather than doing this loop with the play button, it's going to have all these individual time steps in the bottom. So that way it makes it much more user friendly to just, click through each time step, and then you can go back, you can go forward. A lot more customizability, if that's a word. Right now, you really can't do that. I mean, the product that I have at the moment is mostly just, I guess you could think of it like a GIF. It pretty much just plays through each frame, but I want to give more control to you guys to actually look at each day. By the way, for context too, what's being played through is each day from November the 19th to November the 28th. I also have the same product for the European model, and I will be posting that as well for Thursday's video. So for my European folks that want something similar to this, I will be working on that, and that shouldn't take me long at all. We can actually show, rather than the United States map, we can also use a European projection, and for the European folks, use the ECMWF. So be on the lookout for that. All right, now WX Rogue, if you haven't checked it out, be sure to do so, because this gets a little bit more into the specific values for some of those cooling and heating degree days. And as you notice, we are trending more towards a heating degree day environment. I mean, take a look, for example, at your population weighted cooling degree days. Yes, they're still there and they still exist, but it's only a couple of regions that are seeing CDD, and even the ones that are, as we just talked about, I mean, we're looking at some pretty low values. And at least at the moment with the GFS interpretation, we're talking about anywhere between that, 4 to 8. I'm still putting about a broad paintbrush of 5 to 15, but you get the point. It's still within that ballpark of CDD, not terribly high like we saw this summer, of course. And that makes sense because we're now going into winter. And I would actually argue, too, we had pretty high CDD even going into October. So I think at this point, seasons are out the window. But then contrast that to heating degree days, and look at this, right? And I think this map does it justice, this chart, I should say. Look at this bullish pattern, right? I mean, we're talking about a massive spike in HDD. And by the way, I've had a couple of folks within Energy Rogue, some of our subscribers, ask me, hey, Brendan, how can you see the trends? How can you see any sort of change in the models day to day? We can look at each individual run, and there are companies and there are people that do that. Or the simplest way to do it, in your case, is to just refresh this page, say, come back in 6 to 12 hours. You will see a change. One of the change that I noticed is, for example, with some of these HDD, and by the way, this is population weighted, is that we are seeing these total heating degree days increasing right around this November 27th to 30th. So we're actually seeing what's called an uptrend in our output, meaning that we are seeing models become more bullish towards colder temperatures. In this case, we're just looking at the GFS, but the European model, in some respect, is also showing something similar to that as well. So, general trend here over the next week and a half, 2 weeks, is for colder temperatures. And we're really going to see a cold punch. And I would actually make the argument that we're going to see some of the coldest temperatures we've seen in what kind of feels like the last couple of years. I mean, and that's crazy to think, because places like the Midwest, we're used to temperatures, in the 20s, right? It's not that far-fetched. But considering how winters have gone for many across the United States, this is a it feels like winter again, right? It's going to take some adjusting. So that's in the immediate term. And for those folks that haven't checked it out, be sure to check out wxrogue.com for the latest information. It's a wonderful resource. And by the way, here's the catch. There is no catch. It's free. You can use this, both the freemium and the premium products that you just saw if you're looking for gas-weighted degree days. Also here on the bottom, we have the NAM if you want more of a short-term outlook on some of those temperatures and heating and cooling degree days. And of course, we also will repost some of the NOAA products as well. This won't be free forever, so I highly, highly suggest you take full advantage of it and use it. The freemium will always be free, but the premium will eventually be behind a paywall, and more products will be continuously added to it, such as the map that you just saw just now as we're working through that. That will also be a part of this suite. Historical temperatures and archives. There's going to be a lot of information behind that premium as we continue to work through it, so I highly recommend you take advantage of stuff that's free, especially content like this, because it's derived from the models that you use every single day and that are open source. So there you go. Bookmark it, paste it, do what you got to do to remember this website, because it's going to be very useful for you. Even if you're not an energy nat gas trader, you're going to find that there's some trends here that you can follow, and maybe you can learn a thing or two from it. Now, for our last product of the night, we're going to end things by looking at the CFS. And many of you are probably thinking, oh my gosh, Brendan is using something besides the GFS. I know, right? The CFS V2 is a product that I try to stay away from because I don't want to give people false hope. I know there's a lot of folks that are watching this video that are energy and nat gas traders. That's most of the people that watch this content. They're going to see this map, and they're going to see this product and go, oh man, it is going to be winter for the whole month of December. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, tread lightly. Proceed with caution, you're about to see. The whole purpose of this exercise is simply just to show you the general pattern trend that we're seeing on some of our longer range models. This is certainly not something that is set in stone, and as a matter of fact, I promise you, things will change. But I just want to show you this to give you an idea of the general trends we are seeing and see what that signals to. Are we talking a colder temperature regime? Are we talking a rebound back to the mild regime that we saw in 2023 and 24? What does that look like? So we're going to begin first by taking a look here at the 500 millibar map. This is our jet stream for those folks that are new. We can see that this low pressure system out in the lower Great Lakes is going to be responsible for whiplashing some cold air on the back side. Some folks in meteorology say, Arctic blast, dude. Whoa. Whatever you want to call it, I don't care, right? I know there's a lot of people that get really upset and butthurt over terminology of weather. The cold is cold, all right? You want to call it Arctic blast, you want to call it Santa's coming to town, I don't care. Cold air is coming, all right? It's going to be heading towards the Midwest, especially over these next 12 to 24 hours. Could even see some snow on the back end for places like Chicago, Wisconsin. Now, contrast that to the Pacific Northwest. You will be seeing snow, but only in certain spots. So Northern California, some of those higher elevations are expecting to see a few feet of snow, depending on where you're at. But as we go forward into what would be Thursday into Friday, we begin to see off to the top right that Greenland block begin to show up off the screen. And that's what's going to be the catalyst behind that cold air invasion, whatever term you want to use, that's going to impact a large swath of the country, especially the northern half of the United States. And you're going to see that right now. So this is Monday, November 25th, right? The Greenland block sets up early next week at some point. And then look at that cold air, right? How can we tell? Because remember, when we're looking at cold air intrusion, this high pressure acts as a punch, right? It's punching and dislodging these circumpolar lows that circulate around the North Pole. And it helps to then displace it and essentially move further south, equatorward. And so this big jet you see here, that's that cold air being advected southward, and that is a large swath. So don't just think about the magnitude of the cold. The other thing to consider too is think about both the pattern, but also how many people are going to be impacted. What's the area? What's the scope? And we're talking about a pretty large area to start out the middle of next week, and that eventually carries over into the Midwest and Northeast by the time we get to later on next week. We're talking points beyond Black Friday and also heading into what would not be this weekend, but the weekend after. So that continues. We get a lot of cold air. And that the Greenland block, I should say, begins to dissipate a bit. And you would think that the cold ends. Greenland block's gone, time to bring in the mild air. Well, according to the CFS, not necessarily. If we get an upper level ridge that shows up here in the Pacific Northwest, well then we're going to have another ridge that shows up in the Central Pacific, and that's going to also help to advect cold air southward. So you got two mechanisms. You can either get a ridge up in the Greenland block, that's more of those common blocking patterns, or you can get these frequent little ridges that show up in the Pacific Northwest that help to also dislodge cold air southeast. I would argue that the Greenland block tends to perform a lot better with that, tends to be a little bit more severe, but that's just simply opinion, not necessarily rooted in science. As we go forward in time, you can see once again systems beginning to dig southward across California and the Four Corner states. This would be more reminiscent of some of those warmer temperatures. So again, that oscillating pattern is expected to continue as we head into December, but we still see, look at that again, get another little blocking pattern to set up and more cold air digging south. So what I will say, and according to the CFS, what this tells me is relatively straightforward and simple. We are still due for some isolated warming up or mild temperature regimes for areas that we're expecting a cold winter for, the Midwest and the Northeast as an example. But what we are seeing is because of the pattern we're going into, because we are entering into La Nina at this point, and because of what we're already observing, most of December, I predict, will be below normal for the Midwest, the Northeast, New England, Upper Midwest. If you've been following my content, in short, my prediction does not change. As a matter of fact, tonight, I'm actually more bullish in the month of December than I was last week. I become more bullish in some of those colder temperatures that then leak into January and February. Can't say the same for March. If I'm thinking really, really long term, I'm actually predicting we see a pretty quick warm up after this winter, starting in March. I think we're going to rebound pretty fast. But for at least the winter, December and January, I think we're going to see that consistency of below normal temperatures for areas that we expect to climatologically with La Nina, and that is the Midwest, the Northeast, New England, and the Upper Midwest. The South Central United States and really the southern half of the United States should remain mostly above normal during this period, with the isolated chance of seeing a cold air punch, Arctic blast, polar vortex, etc. Right? Call a spade a spade. A cold air regime that gets as far south as Texas at least once during the month of I would even say during the month of December, at least one episode of it, and then probably even another one in January. But I'm going to still stick to one at this time. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, be sure to comment down below on the channel. Like I said, be sure to subscribe, right? We post these videos out. We don't do any crazy thumbnails, none of that stuff. I let somebody else do it. We do have pretty funny titles. We make it humorous here on the channel. I do appreciate all of your support. And for our friends back over on Energy Rogue, thank you so much for your feedback on our products. Definitely going to be asking for more feedback going forward, especially as we finalize the last bit of the first iteration of the WX Rogue tier, or iteration of WX Rogue, I should say, the first tier subscription. We really do appreciate your feedback up to this point. We're at the final home stretch. We are almost done. We're like right there. It's like 98% complete. And really looking forward to showing off some of these additional products to you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on Thursday with another weather video. Take care.